Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Sean Ferrari, and Brad Moody as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Sean, and Brad.
Another episode of the Cash News Podcast. I'm joined by the myth and the legend, Brad Moody, my esteemed co-host. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's getting warm. It's officially summer, right?
Yes.
We're round 30 of the, I don't know if you call it rounds in the World Cup, and all sorts of stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, we were talking about the World Cup as we were having our call today, and they were talking about how LA and San Francisco are inundated with excess cash. So I guess that's good to hear that there's the events are bringing some cash in circulation. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what was it, in both Miami and Boston, Scotland drank all the beer. Like in Boston, a real story. They ran out of beer. Even Fenway Park, which has nothing to do with, like, the Scottish fans were partying, and then they went to Miami. They did not run out of beer in Miami because they bought like these big tankers in. And
I didn't hear that.
No issues, no problems. Just people. It was a real thing. Like, they were playing bagpipes, enjoying themselves. Like, it was pretty surreal. But to think Boston's not a town that you would think, it's not a beer town, and they ran out of it. That's pretty neat. So there you go. You got some cash coming in.
That's right. Absolutely. You know, another thing that starts is hurricane season. Hurricane season has started. That's when you talk about resiliency of cash and being able to do, what happens when the network goes down. You were just catching me up on Venezuela earlier, and just imagine if that were to happen anywhere else and not being able to, no internet, no phone, no electricity, and what do you do, right?
Yeah. I think we talk about it every year on the podcast, of the importance of having a surplus supply, and we always have there was a circumstance. So Swift went down for a day. There was an outage for AWS, and no one could ring things up, and so definitely, like, cash is one of those things that works all the time. But then, it's a really unfortunate event. But by the time, I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but yesterday there were two significant, 7.5, and then 40 seconds later a 7.2 earthquake, and that's a perfect example of where infrastructure is not going to work. Doesn't matter how much fail-safe you have in. And that's when, you go back to that paper currency, that real currency really matters. And I don't know where we were. We were in DC, actually, and we were standing at a round table with a bunch of folks, and it was like, how much cash do you say you should keep? And it's like, well, it kind of depends on what you mean. But hurricane season, is something that we talk about all the time for the importance of cash, but it's also the importance of cash visibility, of understanding where your cash is in your supply chain. Like, where is it? Because in certain places, you have hurricanes that are really, really catastrophic, and there are these aren't made up stories, where there are big retailers and banks that lose their money for sometimes weeks at a time. And then, one of the largest retailers in the world made a comment at a event I was at once, and she said, we lose hundreds of $millions, and then we get a bunch of wet money back weeks and weeks later. And she said it's really disruptive to the business.
Yeah. I remember, going back Hurricane Sandy, and, never wanted to relive that. And, just asking them, when I was with the bank, asking armored carriers, I need you to go empty these ATMs. And, like, it's underwater. Like, what do you want me to scuba dive to get the cassettes out? And, it becomes an issue. And then, you got to decontaminate and get to the Fed. And because, at any point for a big bank, they could have, several $billion in float just sitting in ATMs. And, that cash circulation becomes an issue.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty interesting to see. And it's funny because the market leaders always want to flood the area with cash. And the problem with that is that when people evacuate, so now all the cash is in one area, but the cash is not where they're going, right? So it's always that delicate balance to equal that out to make sure it works. And a lot of sleepless nights in command centers, and it was a good experience, and we learned a lot.
Yeah. It's funny that what you learn in those events also is that the aftermath of things, and obviously Hurricane Sandy, I didn't work at Control Tech. Fast forward, but like now I understand like how money expands when it's wet, and how you need to make sure that your packaging allows for that, and how sealed versus what's really sealed versus not, and all those little idiosyncrasies make a difference, because you now have a whole nother problem with, oh, I gotta make sure it's sealed. Contaminated cash, like you talk about that as mold and all these things that come along with it that are obvious after the fact. Like, well, of course. Well, yeah, but you didn't plan for that, though, did you? Like, you never really. And Hurricane Sandy, like, I had worked in Manhattan at the time. I lived right across the river in New Jersey, so I was like in the Weehawken area, and I remember going into the city because in that area you had a train, a public MTA bus, a ferry, or what they call jitney buses, the little buses that you could just get on, and they ran 100% of the time. So I actually went in, and to your point, was in a command, like in a sock for days, and I don't think I could describe like what it's like to to see subways, like not a little bit of water, like 20, 30 feet of water in places that you would never see it. And I moved from Long Island about 6 months before, and places that flooded, but not flooded like, hey, there's a couple feet of water, like flooded where we're like, wait, there used to be a building there. And I think probably the only thing I can equate to it most recently was the flash flooding in Asheville.
Right.
When I have a friend and a customer who sent me a picture from a drone shot, and it there's AI now, right? So you don't know what's real, and I'm like, wait, is that the the roof of your building? And it was up to the roof. You're talking like 28 feet of water, and not just the water, but I think they said they had 8 or 9 feet of mud in the buildings afterwards. So like, you don't really, it's catastrophic, and that's a perfect example of where like, Starlink, like everybody goes, oh, we have Starlink today. I'm like, yeah, but you have nothing to plug it into. That ATM's underwater. Like it's a really catastrophic event, and no, clearly, right, we're on the Cash News podcast, so self-fulfilling, right? No, this is really the podcast. The whole purpose of the podcast is to talk about what really happens.
Yeah, it's true though. I mean, it makes an impact, and then that's when a hammer becomes $100 too, and change is not given. So throw coin out the window. It's not even an issue, but the bartering system and everything else like that. Then fuel. You can't pump fuel. So what do you do about fuel to get to A to B? And then you look at from the workforce perspective of, hey, I need to go to work, but I also need to have safety and security for my family because my house doesn't have a roof anymore. It's just it all trickles down, and it's interesting. I was with my daughter this past weekend, and I because she lives in Boone, North Carolina, right? So their whole town got not flattened, but it was affected by the floods like they never thought it would. What mountain town floods? Well, Boone, Asheville, and so it's just interesting how you see the areas that are affected that are all have fresh paint, and now you got one building that's there and it's an empty lot next to it, where the building was swept away. So, I used to do speaking engagements about business resiliency and business continuity plans. And one of my favorite pictures was a slide of somebody of Hurricane Katrina in a kayak next to, I'll just say, a bank ATM in New Orleans, in a kayak with, all you saw was the top part of the ATM, and so you saw her in a kayak with the ATM card, like, hey, how do I use it? Was just, it's a classic picture, but it's relevant.
We talk about it all the time, and I think we always talk about it during hurricane season. We always talk about it after event, but uh, there's no doubt that people understand the value, but I think it's a good reminder of if you live in a hurricane prone area, and I would argue if you live anywhere and you can, can put some money aside, it's a really
Yeah.
good idea. And that question that came up when we were together at a round table, we were at DC, someone said, well, how much should I hold? That's a personal question. Like it depends on how much you'll need, where you live, how much you can. I'm not suggesting that people put $10,000 in their sock drawer. It's just have enough money, to there are some studies out there that suggest you should have enough money to get through a month, things like that. But that's relative to where you live and what does that mean. When I was young, I mean, I was still in college. Um, I wish I could remember what year it was, but there was this, you may remember it. Maybe I was out of college. It was either late 90s, early 2000s, where there was a blackout that affected the Northeast for a
Oh
couple
yeah,
days. And
yeah,
so I remember this. I don't remember a lot. I remember this as I was at Gold's Gym working out with my friends. I worked at Home Depot at the time, so I was out of college, and we got home and everything went off. We thought it was just a regular. We drove, and after like an hour or two, this is for all the listeners. The internet was still in the very early days, like very early days. So you had AOL or like CompuServe. It wasn't like, and you still had regular radio, and like there wasn't. Everybody didn't have a cell phone, so. I actually had a two-way pager for work. I remember vividly, and I had, oh, because of my job, I had an emergency bag phone that I wasn't allowed to use unless there was an emergency in the car. Like, probably because it was like $100 a minute or something crazy. And I literally was told like you cannot use this like ever unless like emergency. And I remember the like trying to use that didn't work, and I'm like, uh-oh, like trying to call because we were trying to figure out what stores had to be closed. And probably 4 or 5 hours into it, we at listening to the radio, you realize like, oh wow, like this is affecting a major part. And couldn't communicate with anybody. And my buddy, I had a roommate at the time. I had a townhouse. So we got to get a generator, and we lived not too far from a place. And this I've never probably told the story there. And we both had cash in the house. We
right.
both had a few $100s in the house. Granted, this is probably 27 years ago, so keep that concept into mind. So we probably had like a couple $100s together, and we went to this place that was like a farmer's market type place that sold like equipment too. And there was a guy standing outside, and I'll never forget. We pull in, we need a generator. Oh, I got two left, and he was like cash only, and there's a 50% surcharge, and we
Right.
paid. And I said, you got two left? He said, yeah, because most people don't have cash. This is 27 years ago. They didn't. He's like, but what it was is most people didn't have $600 on them, and keep that in mind. Like that's how much it really was. It was like double the
Right.
price, was $600, and we got that generator for 2 days, and we were living life. And I remember when things started to come on, but like it stuck with me for years of like how something simple can turn into something where that little bit of money that we had allowed us to get electricity. And then of course everybody in the neighborhood was over the house, and we were sharing food, and we had to eat grilling because it was going bad. But yeah, no, I do think it's a real thing, and that you should really, with everything that's going on in the world, think about what you can do, squirrel away, and you know, I would definitely put it in there. And hurricane season is why we wanted to get out here. We went a lot longer than I thought we would. We were just going to talk
Yeah.
about hurricanes.
Yeah. Well, I'd tell you the one thing that people also need to recognize is that, you know, it's all well and fine to have money in your home, for this kind of purpose but you got to be able to access it. So there's that. But then two, you always have to have something to be able to spend it on too. So like what my daughter realized when Boone was hit was that the grocery stores were closed. Everything was closed, right? So yes, she had a stockpile of money because she's a smart kid, but she had nothing to buy. There was nothing for her to go and buy. So she left and went and stayed with friends in Charlotte. That's just something to always got to consider, that just because you have the money doesn't mean you can spend it.
Yeah. I actually think probably most of our listeners, I would assume, are in the business. I don't know that this is the podcast. A lot of people that are doing what we do and are listening to, and our listenership fluctuates so much, it's hard to tell. But I do think like if you have a business resilience plan for work, um, in 2026, you got multiple wars, all these things going on. You should have a little plan for yourself. I think it's a great real thought process of like, to your point, like you're not gonna just probably in a major weather event, probably not gonna make it to the store. In a
Right.
major cyber event, you're probably not gonna make it to the store because the stores a lot of stores are going to not be equipped. And we learned something in COVID that I think history has told us that humans generally don't do well with things. That's why we ran out of toilet paper. That's why we ran we had all of those shortages because so you sometimes if you're not first in line, someone will take it. And I think COVID was like the prime example was a great human experiment to say like, wow, like we ran, we were buying up all the toilet paper and all of the paper towels, and then it was like every week there'd be like a new thing, and it wasn't a true supply and demand challenge. It was an inflated demand because someone you would
Right.
buy 4x, so everybody
Yep.
buys 5x, and you know, Control Tech, we have a different division. We do packaging, we do other things. So I remember, even me going like, well, I got to buy more. My kids were young. One of my kids was younger. Got to buy more children's Motrin just in case it runs out. Like that was one of the things that you couldn't get. You couldn't get Tylenol or Advil or anything. And so it becomes psychological. So to your point, you really should not super hard. What's the plan? What are the things I actually need? What actually need, not what I think I need. Like
Right.
when there was a Dorito shortage, I'm like, yep, I get it. I love Doritos, but like that's not the first thing on the list.
I don't need
Yeah,
Doritos.
yeah. So that's actually a really good point, Brad. I think it's something that probably falls in deaf ears. If I got my cash, I got my go bag, I got my flashlight, but I don't actually know where the next store is. And another real story, and again, I love it. You're bringing things up that makes sense. Is not too long ago there was a pretty good storm in northern Jersey, and where I live, and they said there would not be power for 5 days where we lived, and there were no generators anywhere, but I went on, my cell phone, and 111 miles away, there were 300 generators sitting, an hour and 40-minute drive. And I drove my car up and I got a big generator that was on sale with no price because I drove it back. And I would have bought some for my neighbors, not to sell them because I knew they needed them, but I couldn't fit, like I don't
Right.
have,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
big and heavy. And then I said to my neighbor, I'm like, hey, like, like we live in a really big area. Like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York is massive. Like when you think about it, you go a little north, just a little north, like 90 miles north, and there are lots of home improvement stores, and they have not a little bit of stock, ton of stock. And that
All
was
the stuff.
like, yeah, like, and the craziest thing of all is that was, I didn't have that on the plan, but afterwards I was telling everybody, I'm like, this is what you got to do. And so like we're very resilient when we want to be, but it's also we're used to convenience. And
And
I don't think we realize how used to convenience we are.
I was literally about to say we're spoiled with convenience, right?
Yeah.
That's we all want it. We want it now. We're going through Amazon days, and if I want to order something, I want it delivered tomorrow morning. And it's that now. And then when you have some type of event that you can't get now, you just pout and you just say, but I don't, but I want, right? And
Yeah.
hey, again, said it a
All
hundred
of this
times.
stuff.
As long as consumers still spend money, things are looking up.
Yeah. So takeaways here is get some cash and put a plan together and be safe in the hurricane
Yep.
season. We want everybody to be safe, and we appreciate the listening. Hopefully you're subscribing. We know that we get way more listens than subscribers, which we love, but subscribers are how people find us. So if you are listening to this, it takes 1 second to subscribe. It'd be a big help for us. And if you're interested in joining us as a guest, neither Brad or I are very hard to find. So you can look us up on LinkedIn. You can go right to Control Tech's website. It's an open platform. We'd love to have you on.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Brad.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.